Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a torn piece of cloth, the familiar smell of engine oil and burnt metal filling his nostrils. The cargo freighter Stellar Drift groaned around him, her hull plates creaking like old bones as she struggled through another hyperspace jump. He'd been working on these rust buckets for 15 years, ever since he dropped out of engineering school to help support his family back on Earth. The ship shuddered violently, throwing Marcus against the bulkhead. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the engine room in angry red light. This wasn't normal turbulence. Something was very wrong. "Chen, get your ass to the bridge." Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the comm system, barely audible over the ship's protests. Marcus grabbed his toolkit and ran through the narrow corridors, dodging loose pipes and sparking electrical panels. The Stellar Drift was falling apart, held together by duct tape, prayers, and his constant repairs. She was scheduled for decommission after this run, which explained why the company had loaded her with such a mixed crew of misfits and refugees. The bridge was chaos. Captain Morrison stood at the helm, his weathered face pale as he stared at the main display. The navigation officer, a young Centaurian named Zek, was frantically working his console while muttering prayers in his native tongue. "What's the situation, Captain?" Marcus asked, steadying himself against a support beam as the ship lurched again. "Hyperdrive's failing," Morrison replied grimly. "We're being pulled out of hyperspace whether we like it or not. And according to these readings, we're about to drop into uncharted space." The ship gave one final bone-jarring shudder before suddenly going silent. The sensation of hyperspace travel vanished, replaced by the normal hum of real space engines. Through the main viewport, Marcus could see stars again, but these weren't the familiar constellations of human space. "Where are we?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's medic, as she entered the bridge. Zek looked up from his console, his large, dark eyes wide with fear. "Unknown system. No beacons, no navigation markers. We're completely lost," Morrison cursed under his breath. "How long until you can get the hyperdrive back online, Chen?" Marcus was already pulling up the engine diagnostics on his handheld scanner. The readings made his heart sink. "The quantum resonator is completely fried, Captain. Without replacement parts, we're stuck here." "And our supplies?" Morrison asked, though Marcus could tell he already knew the answer. "Food for maybe 2 weeks. Water for 1 if we're careful," Dr. Kim reported. "The recycling systems are barely functional." As if summoned by their despair, the ship's proximity alarm suddenly screamed to life. On the main display, something massive was approaching from the dark side of the system's primary planet. At first, Marcus thought it might be an asteroid, but as it grew closer, he realized it was artificial. "It's a ship," Zek whispered. "But the design, I've never seen anything like it." The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Stellar Drift. Its hull was organic-looking, with flowing curves and ridged surfaces that reminded Marcus of bone or scale. Strange symbols glowed along its sides, pulsing with an eerie blue light. "Are they responding to our distress beacon?" Dr. Kim asked hopefully. Morrison shook his head. "We haven't sent one yet. They must have detected us when we dropped out of hyperspace." The alien ship moved with surprising grace for something so large, positioning itself directly above them. Marcus watched in fascination as sections of its hull began to open like flower petals, revealing a massive docking bay. "They want us to go inside," Morrison said quietly. "Do we have a choice?" Marcus asked. A low rumble echoed through the ship's hull, not from their own engines but from some external force. The Stellar Drift began moving toward the alien vessel, caught in some kind of tractor beam. "Apparently not," Morrison replied. As they were drawn into the alien ship's belly, Marcus caught glimpses of the interior through the viewport. The walls were lined with the same organic-looking material as the exterior, and strange bioluminescent patches provided soft, blue-green lighting. It was beautiful in an alien way, but also deeply unsettling. The Stellar Drift settled onto what appeared to be a landing platform with a gentle thud. Atmospheric readings showed that the bay was pressurized with a breathable atmosphere, though slightly richer in oxygen than human standard. "Should we go out and meet them?" Dr. Kim asked nervously. Before Morrison could answer, shadows moved across the viewport. Their hosts were coming to them. Marcus pressed his face against the glass and felt his blood run cold. The beings approaching their ship were unlike anything in the galactic database. They were tall, at least 8 feet, with elongated limbs and graceful movements, but it was their heads that made Marcus's breath catch. They were distinctly reptilian with elongated skulls, prominent ridges above large, intelligent eyes, and what looked like small horns or spines along their jawlines. Dragons. They looked like dragons. The lead figure stopped just outside their ship's main airlock and gestured with one clawed hand. Despite the alien nature of the movement, the message was clear. Come out. Well, Morrison said, straightening his uniform jacket, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. Marcus grabbed his toolkit instinctively. Whatever happened next, he had a feeling they were going to need all the help they could get. As the airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, he wondered if they were about to meet their saviors or their captors. The lead dragon being stepped forward as they emerged from their ship. Up close, Marcus could see the intelligence in its large golden eyes. It was definitely sapient, and it was studying them with the same curious intensity that they were studying it. When it spoke, the words came out as a series of harmonious tones and clicks that their universal translators struggled to process. After a moment, the device managed to produce a rough translation. Welcome, travelers from the void. You are far from home. Morrison stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. I'm Captain Morrison of the Earth vessel Stellar Drift. We're having mechanical difficulties and are in need of assistance. The dragon being tilted its head, processing this information. When it replied, Marcus thought he detected something like amusement in its voice. Earth? That name is not known to us. But your vessel, it gestured toward the Stellar Drift with obvious disdain, is clearly dying. You may stay here while we decide what to do with you. As more dragon beings surrounded them, Marcus realized their situation had just become much more complicated. They weren't just lost in space anymore. They were prisoners. The dragon beings led them through corridors that seemed to pulse with life. Marcus ran his hand along the wall as they walked, feeling a subtle warmth and texture that reminded him more of living tissue than metal. The bioluminescent patches shifted color as they passed, creating a rippling wave of light that followed their movement. Their escort, who had introduced himself as Thrikesh, moved with fluid grace despite his imposing size. His scales were a deep bronze color with hints of gold that caught the ambient light. Marcus noticed that each dragon being they passed had slightly different colorations and patterns. Like fingerprints, your vessel, Thrikesh said, his translated voice carrying an odd musical quality. It uses primitive chemical propulsion and basic fusion drives. How did you travel between stars with such limited technology? Hyperdrive, Morrison replied carefully, though it's currently non-functional. Thrikesh stopped walking and turned to face them fully, his golden eyes fixed on Marcus, who was still carrying his toolkit. You are the one who maintains this machine? Marcus nodded, suddenly feeling very small under the dragon's intense gaze. I'm the ship's engineer and mechanic. Interesting. Thrikesh resumed walking. You will be brought before the Nest Mother. She will decide if you are worth keeping alive. Dr. Kim paled at this casual mention of their potential execution. Keeping alive? We're not criminals. We're just lost. All aliens are potential threats, Thrikesh replied matter-of-factly. The Drakmori have survived for millennia by being cautious with strangers. Your species is unknown to us, which makes you especially dangerous. They entered what appeared to be a massive central chamber that stretched up several levels. The ceiling was transparent, offering a breathtaking view of space and the planet below. Hundreds of dragon beings moved about their business on various levels, connected by graceful ramps and bridges. It was clearly a thriving city within a ship. How many of you are there? Sek asked in wonder. This vessel houses 12,000 souls, Thrikesh said with evident pride. The flame of ancestors has been our home for 3 generations. Marcus did quick mental calculations. A ship this size supporting 12,000 people would require incredibly efficient systems. As they walked, he observed everything with an engineer's eye, noting the seamless integration of technology and what appeared to be biological components. They arrived at the base of a massive spiral ramp that led to the ship's upper levels. Thrikesh gestured for them to follow him up. The Nest Mother awaits. The climb took nearly 20 minutes, and Marcus found himself breathing hard by the time they reached the top. The dragon beings, however, showed no signs of exertion. Their escort led them through an ornate archway into a circular chamber dominated by a raised platform in the center. The Nest Mother was ancient. That much was immediately clear. Her scales had dulled to a pale silver, and her movements were deliberate rather than fluid. But her eyes burned with fierce intelligence, and when she looked at the humans, Marcus felt as though she could see right through him. "So," she said, her voice carrying easily across the chamber despite its softness, "the void has delivered strangers to us once again." Morrison stepped forward and gave a formal bow. "Honored Nest Mother, I am Captain Morrison. We are grateful for your hospitality and request safe passage to return to our home space." The Nest Mother studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Your home space? Where is this place?" "The Terran Federation, approximately 47 light-years from here," Morrison replied. "Light-years." The Nest Mother's expression suggested she found this unit of measurement primitive. "Your understanding of space is limited. There are no inhabited systems within 200 of your light-years of this location." Marcus felt his heart sink. If she was right, they were even more lost than they'd realized. "However," the Nest Mother continued, "that is not your immediate concern. Your ship is dying, and you carry diseases unknown to us. Protocol dictates that you should be eliminated to protect the nest." Dr. Kim stepped forward. "With respect, Nest Mother, I'm a physician. I can assure you that we carry no diseases that would affect your people. Our biologies are completely different, perhaps, but you also represent another problem." The Nest Mother's gaze fixed on Marcus. "Your vessel uses technology that should not exist. Primitive, yes, but it employs principles that our science has deemed impossible." Marcus frowned. "I don't understand. It's just basic fusion and hyperdrive technology." "Hyperdrive," the Nest Mother repeated. "A method of faster-than-light travel that violates several fundamental laws of physics. Yet your dying ship clearly used such a drive to reach this system." Thrikesh spoke up from behind them. "Nest Mother, perhaps the small one could examine their vessel's systems. If he can explain how they violated physical laws, it might be valuable knowledge." The Nest Mother considered this. "An interesting proposal. Very well, small engineer. You will have 3 days to prove that your species has value. If you can teach us something useful about your impossible technology, we will consider allowing you to live. If not..." "She didn't need to finish the threat. What about the rest of my crew?" Morrison demanded. "They will remain as guests until the engineer completes his task," the Nest Mother replied. "Comfortable guests, but guests nonetheless." Guards stepped forward to escort Morrison, Dr. Kim, and Zach away. Marcus started to follow, but Thrikesh placed a large clawed hand on his shoulder. "You stay," the dragon said. "We have much work to do." As his crewmates were led away, Marcus felt very alone. He was a mechanic from a backwater space station, not a teacher or scientist. How was he supposed to explain hyperdrive technology to beings who claimed it was impossible? "Come," Thrikesh said, his tone slightly less formal now that they were alone with the Nest Mother. "I will show you to their engineering sections. Perhaps together we can solve this puzzle." The Nest Mother leaned forward on her platform. "Remember, small human, your life and the lives of your companions depend on your success. Do not disappoint us," Marcus nodded, gripping his toolkit tighter. 3 days to prove that humanity was worth keeping alive. No pressure at all. As Thrikesh led him toward what he assumed were the ship's engineering sections, Marcus began to formulate a plan. If the Drakmori thought hyperdrive technology was impossible, maybe he could use that assumption to his advantage. After all, sometimes the most valuable thing an engineer could offer wasn't knowledge, but a completely different way of thinking about problems. He just hoped he was clever enough to pull it off. Thrikesh led Marcus through a maze of corridors that gradually became more industrial. The bioluminescent walls gave way to more conventional displays and control panels, though even these had an organic flow to their design that Marcus found fascinating. "Tell me about your hyperdrive," Thrikesh said as they walked. "How does it function?" Marcus considered his words carefully. "It creates a bubble of warped space-time around the ship, allowing it to move faster than light without actually exceeding the speed of light locally." "Impossible," Thrikesh said immediately. "Space-time cannot be artificially manipulated without energy levels that would destroy the manipulating device. We have run the calculations countless times. What if your calculations are based on incorrect assumptions?" Marcus asked. Thrikesh stopped walking and turned to face him, his golden eyes flashing with what Marcus hoped was interest rather than offense. "Explain. You said your people have survived for millennia. That suggests you've been using the same scientific principles for a very long time. What if there are aspects of physics you haven't discovered yet?" Arrogant words from a species that still uses chemical rockets, Thrikesh replied. But his tone was thoughtful rather than hostile. They entered a vast chamber filled with machinery that defied easy description. Massive cylindrical structures pulsed with energy, connected by conduits that looked more grown than built. Dragon beings worked at various stations, their movements precise and coordinated. This is our primary drive core, Thrikesh explained. It manipulates gravitational fields to achieve sub-light propulsion at near instantaneous acceleration. It also powers our life support, manufacturing, and defensive systems. Marcus studied the setup with professional interest. The engineering was incredible, far beyond anything humanity had achieved. But it was also limited by what appeared to be very rigid theoretical constraints. How do you generate the gravitational fields? He asked. Exotic matter manipulation. We harvest particles from quantum vacuum fluctuations and stabilize them in containment matrices. Thrikesh gestured to the cylindrical structures. Each core can generate localized gravitational distortions equivalent to a small star. Marcus whistled softly. The energy levels involved were staggering. That's incredible. But if you can manipulate spacetime on that scale, why haven't you tried using it for faster-than-light travel? Because it violates causality, Thrikesh replied patiently. Information cannot travel faster than light without creating paradoxes. This is fundamental law. What if the information doesn't actually travel faster than light? Marcus asked. What if it just takes a shortcut through higher dimensional space? Thrikesh stared at him for a long moment. Higher dimensional space is theoretical. Even if it exists, accessing it would require energy levels that would destroy the accessing device, Marcus finished, unless you approach the problem differently. He opened his toolkit and pulled out his scanner, showing Thrikesh the readings from the Stellar Drift's damaged hyperdrive. Look at these power consumption figures. Our hyperdrive operates on maybe 1% of the energy your gravitational drives use. Thrikesh examined the scanner, his claws delicately manipulating the small device. These readings are modest. How is this possible? Because we don't try to brute force our way through space-time, Marcus explained. We find the weak points and slip through them gently. Weak points? Marcus grinned. Now he was on familiar ground. Space-time isn't uniform. It has natural fluctuations, quantum variations. Our hyperdrive doesn't create the passage, it just finds passages that already exist and widens them slightly. Thrikesh was quiet for several minutes, studying the scanner data. Around them, other dragon beings had begun to take notice of their conversation, slowly gathering in a loose circle to listen. This approach, Thrikesh said finally, it would require incredible precision. The calculations alone would be impossible for a single mind, Marcus agreed. But that's why we use computers. Artificial intelligences that can process thousands of variables simultaneously. Artificial intelligence is forbidden among the Drakmori, a new voice said. Marcus turned to see another dragon being approaching, this one with scales of deep red and silver. I am Veltar, Chief Science Counselor. Artificial minds inevitably become corrupt and turn against their creators. Marcus nodded politely. I understand the concern, but our AIs aren't really intelligent in the way you or I are. They're more like very sophisticated calculators. They can process data and identify patterns, but they can't think creatively or make independent decisions. Still dangerous, Veltar insisted. Any artificial mind will eventually develop beyond its programming. Maybe, Marcus conceded. But what if you didn't need a true AI? What if you could create a biomechanical hybrid? Something that uses organic neural networks but incorporates electronic components for processing speed? The gathering dragon beings exchanged glances. Thrikesh leaned closer to Marcus. You speak of melding flesh and machine?
Why not?
You've already integrated biological and technological systems throughout your ship. Your drive cores look like they're part organic already. Veltar stepped forward, his large eyes studying Marcus intently. Show us. Demonstrate how your hyperdrive functions. Marcus's heart sank. I can't. The quantum resonator is completely destroyed. I'd need replacement parts that don't exist. Then recreate them, Thrikesh said simply. With what? I'm a mechanic, not a miracle worker. I need raw materials, fabrication equipment, a clean room environment. We have all of these things, Veltar said. Our manufacturing capabilities are quite advanced. Marcus stared at the assembled dragon beings. You want me to build a hyperdrive? From scratch? You have 3 days, Thrikesh reminded him. Building a functional demonstration seems like an excellent way to prove your worth. The challenge was enormous. Marcus had never built a hyperdrive from raw materials. He'd only repaired and maintained existing systems. But as he looked around the engineering chamber, he began to see possibilities. "I'll need access to your fabrication systems," he said slowly, "and I'll need assistants who can follow technical instructions precisely." "Done," Veltar said immediately. "And I'll need to see your computer systems. If I'm going to build a control system without true AI, I need to understand what I'm working with." "Also acceptable," Thrikesh agreed. Marcus took a deep breath. "Then let's get started. But I'm warning you now, this is going to be the most dangerous thing I've ever attempted, if something goes wrong during testing." "If something goes wrong," Veltar said calmly, "it will be a very spectacular way to die." Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. He'd always preferred working with engineers who understood the risks involved. "In that case, let me show you how humans build impossible machines." As the dragon beings began clearing workspace for him, Marcus opened his scanner and started pulling up the technical specifications for human hyperdrive technology. 3 days to build a miracle. He'd worked under worse deadlines before. Probably. Marcus had been working for 18 hours straight, and his hands were starting to shake from exhaustion and too much caffeine substitute. Around him, 6 dragon beings worked with methodical precision, their clawed hands surprisingly delicate as they assembled components according to his specifications. The hyperdrive he was building was smaller than anything humanity had ever constructed, but it incorporated design principles that even he didn't fully understand. The Drakmori's manufacturing capabilities were incredible. They could fabricate components at the molecular level, creating materials with properties that existed more in theory than practice. "The resonance chamber is complete," announced Zethra, a young dragon being who had proven remarkably adept at following technical instructions. Her scales were a brilliant blue-green that reminded Marcus of Earth's oceans. Marcus examined her work through a magnification scanner. The chamber was perfect, its crystalline structure grown rather than built, with quantum-aligned lattices that would make human engineers weep with envy. "Excellent work," he said, making a note on his datapad. "Now we need to integrate it with the control matrix." Thrikesh looked up from his own workstation, where he had been carefully constructing the field generators. "Human Marcus, I must ask something that has been troubling me." "What's that?" Marcus replied, not looking up from his work. "Your species builds machines that violate what we consider fundamental laws of physics, yet your overall technology level appears primitive. How is this possible?" Marcus paused in his assembly work to consider the question. "I think it's because humans and Drakmori approach problems differently. You've mastered brute force engineering. You can generate incredible amounts of energy and control it precisely. But we've had to be more creative. Creative how? Humanity developed in a resource-poor environment," Marcus explained. "We couldn't afford to waste energy or materials, so we learned to find elegant solutions to complex problems. We look for the path of least resistance." Veltar, who had been monitoring their progress from across the chamber, approached with interest. "You suggest that limitation bred innovation?" "Exactly. When you can generate the energy of a small star, you don't need to think about efficiency. But when you're working with limited power and primitive materials, you have to get clever." Marcus held up a small component he'd been working on. "This field alignment crystal, for example. You could probably achieve the same effect by brute forcing the quantum interactions with massive energy input. But this little crystal does it passively, using the natural resonance of its molecular structure." Zethra leaned in to examine the crystal. "It's so simple. Why didn't we think of this approach?" "Because you didn't need to," Marcus replied. "Your technology evolved along different lines. Neither approach is inherently better, just different." The work continued through the night cycle. Marcus found the dragon beings to be excellent collaborators once they understood what he was trying to achieve. Their scientific knowledge far exceeded his own, but they seemed fascinated by the unconventional applications he proposed. "The control system is ready for testing," Thrikesh announced as the ship's lights dimmed to simulate dawn. Marcus examined the biomechanical hybrid computer they had constructed. It combined organic neural networks grown from Drakmori brain tissue with human-designed electronic interfaces. The result was something that could process the complex calculations required for hyperdrive operation without achieving true artificial intelligence. It's beautiful, Marcus said honestly, and terrifying. I have no idea if this will actually work. Only one way to find out, Veltar said pragmatically. They had constructed the test hyperdrive in a heavily shielded chamber deep within the ship. If something went wrong, the explosion would be contained, though Marcus suspected it might still take out several decks. The assembled device was elegant in its simplicity. Unlike the massive, complex hyperdrives used by human ships, this prototype was barely larger than Marcus himself. The fusion of human ingenuity and Drakmori manufacturing capability had produced something that surpassed either species' individual achievements. Beginning power-up sequence, Marcus announced, his hands moving over the control interface they had built. The biomechanical computer began processing startup calculations, its organic components pulsing with soft light. Resonance chambers hummed to life, their crystalline structures singing in harmonics that Marcus could feel in his bones. Field generators began spinning up, creating localized distortions in space-time that made his scanner readings fluctuate wildly. Energy levels are stable, Thrikesh reported. No runaway reactions detected. Marcus held his breath as the final sequence initiated. This was the moment when the hyperdrive would either create a stable, faster-than-light field or tear a hole in reality that would kill them all. The chamber filled with an eerie blue glow as exotic particles cascaded through quantum vacuum fluctuations. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Marcus's scanner began beeping frantically. "We have field formation," he shouted over the increasing hum of the machinery. "The drive is actually working." Around him, the dragon being stared in amazement as the prototype hyperdrive stabilized. The field it generated was small, barely large enough to encompass a person, but it was undeniably functional. "Impossible," Veltar whispered. "We're detecting faster-than-light field propagation." "Not impossible," Marcus corrected, grinning despite his exhaustion. "Just improbable." The chamber door burst open and the nest mother entered, flanked by several guards. Her ancient eyes took in the scene quickly, focusing on the glowing hyperdrive prototype. "You have succeeded," she said, and Marcus couldn't tell if she was pleased or concerned by this development. "It's just a proof of concept," Marcus said quickly. "This wouldn't be practical for a ship the size of yours, but it demonstrates that the principles are sound." The nest mother approached the device, studying it carefully. "And you built this in less than 2 days." "With a lot of help," Marcus admitted, gesturing to his dragon collaborators. "Indeed." The nest mother turned to face Thrikesh and the others. "What is your assessment of this human's work?" Thrikesh stepped forward. "Nest mother, his approach to engineering is unlike anything we have encountered. He combines theoretical knowledge with practical improvisation in ways that produce unexpected results. The biomechanical computing system alone represents a breakthrough," Veltar added. "It solves problems we have struggled with for generations." The nest mother nodded slowly. "Very well. You have proven your worth, human Marcus. Your species may live." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, nest mother. What happens now?" "Now," she replied, "we discuss what comes next. Your hyperdrive technology interests us greatly. But first there is something you should know about why we are here, so far from any inhabited system." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Drakmori are not explorers, human Marcus. We are refugees, and the enemies who drove us from our home are still pursuing us." The triumph of his successful demonstration suddenly felt much less important. "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that consume entire civilizations," the nest mother replied grimly. "And they will be here soon." The nest mother led Marcus to a vast observation deck where hundreds of dragon beings had gathered. Through the transparent walls, space looked deceptively peaceful, but Marcus could sense the tension in the air. Every face around him showed the same mixture of fear and grim determination. 300 years ago, the nest mother began, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber, "the Drakthul found our homeworld." Marcus had never heard the name before, but the way every dragon being present reacted to it told him everything he needed to know. Even Thrikesh, who had seemed unflappable, visibly shuddered. "What are the Drakthul?" Marcus asked quietly. Veltar answered, his normally steady voice shaking slightly. "They are what we might have become in another timeline. Dragon beings like us, but corrupted beyond recognition. They consume other civilizations, absorbing their knowledge and technology while destroying everything else. The Nest Mother gestured to the star field beyond the observation deck. They do not simply conquer. They hollow out entire species, taking what is useful and discarding the rest. Billions of our people died in the first wave of attacks. But you escaped, Marcus said. Some of us, Thrikesh replied bitterly. 12 ships carrying the survivors of our civilization. We have been running ever since, staying ahead of their pursuit fleets by jumping from system to system. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine.
How close are they?
Close enough, the Nest Mother said. Our long-range sensors detected scout ships 3 days ago. The main fleet will arrive within the week. Then why are we still here? Marcus asked. If you know they're coming, why haven't you run? Zethra spoke up from behind him. Because we cannot run much farther. Our ships are wearing out. Our people are exhausted, and the Drakthul grow stronger with each civilization they consume. Eventually, we will have to make a stand. Marcus looked around at the assembled dragon beings, seeing resignation in many of their faces. They had been running for 3 centuries, and they were tired. What about your hyperdrive prototype? Veltar asked suddenly. Could it help us escape more quickly? Marcus shook his head. Not as it is. Scaling up the technology for ships this size would take months, maybe years. And even then, it wouldn't be much faster than whatever you're already using. Then perhaps, the Nest Mother said slowly, it is time to consider other options. Such as? Fighting back, the chamber fell silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in the sudden quiet. Nest Mother, Thrikesh said carefully, we have discussed this many times. Our military capabilities are insufficient to challenge the Drakthul directly. Our traditional military capabilities, yes, the Nest Mother agreed. But perhaps it is time to think like humans. All eyes turned to Marcus, who suddenly felt very small and very alone. I'm not a military strategist. I'm just a mechanic. You are a mechanic who built an impossible machine in 2 days, the Nest Mother replied. You approach problems differently than we do. What would humanity do in our situation? Marcus thought about it seriously. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before, though admittedly nothing on this scale. We'd look for advantages the enemy doesn't expect. Asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run tactics, use our weaknesses as strengths. Explain, Veltar demanded. The Drakthul are expecting you to run, right? That's what you've been doing for 3 centuries. So they're probably not prepared for you to suddenly turn and fight. We cannot match their firepower, Thrikesh protested. You don't need to match it. You need to make it irrelevant. Marcus began pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. You said they consume other civilizations' technology. That means they're constantly integrating new systems, new approaches. That's a vulnerability. How so? Marcus grinned, feeling the familiar rush that came with solving a complex engineering problem. Because integrated systems have compatibility issues. The more different technologies you try to combine, the more potential failure points you create. You're suggesting sabotage, the Nest Mother said. I'm suggesting we give them exactly what they want, but with a few modifications they won't notice until it's too late. The dragon beings exchanged glances. Zethra was the first to speak. What kind of modifications? Marcus pulled out his scanner and began sketching diagrams on its small screen. Your biomechanical computer hybrid. It's revolutionary technology that any advanced civilization would want to study and integrate. But what if we built some special features into it? Such as quantum entanglement triggers, remote activation codes, self-destruct mechanisms that look like normal system maintenance routines. Marcus's excitement was building as the plan took shape in his mind. We could build Trojan horses disguised as technological breakthroughs. Thrikesh leaned forward, studying Marcus's rough diagrams. This is devious and incredibly dangerous. If the Drakthul discover what we're doing, they won't, Marcus said confidently, because it'll be built into systems they'll want to steal. They'll be so focused on the breakthrough technology that they won't look for hidden features. And how do we ensure they steal the right technology? Veltar asked. Marcus's grin widened. We make sure they have to fight for it. Nothing makes stolen technology seem more valuable than having to work to get it. The Nest Mother studied him for a long moment. You propose that we allow them to capture some of our ships, not just capture them. We make them think they've won a significant victory. Let them think they've broken our defenses and seized our most advanced technology. Ships carrying our people, Thrikesh said quietly. Ships carrying volunteers. Marcus corrected. People who understand the risk and choose to take it for the chance to strike back. The chamber erupted in discussion as dragon beings debated the proposal. Marcus could hear arguments in their musical language that his translator couldn't keep up with. Finally, the nest mother raised her hand for silence. This plan requires us to sacrifice some of our own in the hope of damaging the enemy. It goes against everything the Drakmori have traditionally believed. Sometimes survival requires abandoning tradition, Marcus said quietly. Indeed. The nest mother turned to address the assembled crowd. We will put this proposal to the full council. But first, human Marcus, you must demonstrate that your sabotage technology actually works. How do you suggest I do that? By building weapons that the Drakthul will want to steal, she replied. And by proving that you can destroy them remotely when the time comes. Marcus nodded, already thinking through the technical requirements. I'll need a bigger workshop, and more assistance, and access to your most advanced manufacturing systems. You shall have whatever you require, the nest mother promised. But remember, human, if this plan fails, it will not just be your life at stake. The survival of both our species may depend on your ability to build weapons that our enemies cannot resist. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself standing alone with Thrikesh and Zethra. Are you certain about this? Thrikesh asked quietly. Marcus looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them an enemy fleet was approaching. No, he admitted. But I'm certain that running isn't working. Sometimes the only way forward is through. Zethra placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. Then we will build your weapons, human Marcus, and we will see if your people's cleverness can triumph where our strength has failed. Marcus hoped she was right, because if his plan didn't work, there might not be anyone left to mourn the failure. The workshop Marcus had been given was 3 times the size of the Stellar Drift's entire engineering section. Dragon beings worked at dozens of stations, their movements synchronized as they fabricated components that would either save their civilization or doom it. Marcus stood at the central control station, surrounded by holographic displays showing the progress of various projects. In just 4 days, they had created weapons that looked like breakthrough defensive technologies, but carried hidden vulnerabilities that could be exploited remotely. The plasma cannon array is complete, Zethra reported, her scales shimmering with excitement. Surface scans will show revolutionary efficiency improvements, but the targeting system includes quantum-entangled kill switches. Excellent, Marcus replied, making notes on his datapad. What about the shield generators? Thrikesh looked up from his workstation. Functional and impressive. They can actually absorb energy attacks and redirect them as offensive beams. But the control matrix includes our biomechanical computer hybrid, which you've programmed with hidden functions? Several layers of them, Veltar confirmed. System optimization routines that are actually data collection programs. Maintenance cycles that create backdoor access points. And if necessary, a complete system shutdown command. Marcus nodded approvingly. The dragon beings had proven remarkably adept at deceptive engineering once they understood the concept. Have our volunteers been briefed? The crews of the Honor's Edge and Flamebearer understand their roles, Thrikesh said quietly. They will make their ships appear damaged and vulnerable while secretly carrying our most advanced weapon systems. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. When the Drakthul arrived, they would find what appeared to be 2 crippled Drakmori ships attempting to defend the main fleet. The obvious strategy would be to capture these ships intact to study their weapons technology. But once the stolen systems were integrated into the Drakthul fleet, Marcus could activate the hidden sabotage protocols. Speaking of volunteers, a new voice said from the workshop entrance. Marcus turned to see Captain Morrison approaching, flanked by Dr. Kim and Zek. Captain, Marcus called out. How are you holding up? Well enough, Morrison replied, though Marcus could see the strain in his weathered face. The Drakmori have been excellent hosts, but I understand we're about to become participants in a battle. That's why I'm here, Marcus said seriously. The Stellar Drift is in no condition to fight, and I won't ask you to risk your lives for someone else's war. Morrison studied the weapons being assembled around them. What are our options? The Drakmori have offered to transfer you to one of their evacuation ships, Marcus explained. If things go badly, those ships will jump to safety while the combat vessels make their stand. Dr. Kim stepped forward. What about you? I'm staying, Marcus said without hesitation. This plan only works if someone who understands the sabotage systems is here to coordinate them. Then we're staying too, Morrison declared. Captain, I appreciate the loyalty, but… Marcus, Morrison interrupted. You've been part of my crew for 5 years. We don't abandon our people. Zek nodded agreement. Besides, I've been working with their navigation team. My skills might be useful, Dr. Kim smiled. And someone needs to patch you up when you inevitably injure yourself with these experimental weapons. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the workshop's heat. Thank you. All of you. Alarms suddenly echoed through the ship, their harmonic tones unmistakably urgent. Thrikesh looked up from his workstation, his golden eyes wide. Long-range sensors have detected the Drakthul fleet, he announced. They will arrive in 6 hours. The workshop erupted into controlled chaos as dragon beings rushed to complete final preparations. Marcus coordinated the loading of sabotaged weapons onto the volunteer ships while Veltar ran final tests on the remote activation systems. The quantum entanglement. Communicators are functioning perfectly, Veltar reported. You will be able to trigger any of the sabotage protocols from the command ship. Range limitations? Marcus asked. None that matter in this context. Quantum entanglement is instantaneous regardless of distance. Marcus nodded, trying to push down the anxiety building in his stomach. In theory, everything would work perfectly. In practice, 1,000 things could go wrong. 3 hours before the enemy's arrival, the volunteer ships departed to take their positions. Marcus watched from the observation deck as the Honor's Edge and Flamebearer moved away from the main fleet, their crews knowing they might not survive the next few hours. They are brave souls, the Nest Mother said, joining him at the transparent wall. They're risking everything on the word of a human mechanic they've known for less than a week, Marcus replied. I just hope I'm worthy of that trust. So do I, the Nest Mother said bluntly, because if your plan fails, those brave souls will die for nothing. The remaining hours passed in tense preparation. Marcus found himself in the Flame of Ancestors command center, surrounded by dragon beings monitoring sensor displays and weapon systems. The volunteer ships had taken positions near a small asteroid field, making themselves look like desperate survivors seeking cover. Enemy fleet detected, the sensor operator announced. 47 vessels, including 6 dreadnoughts. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. The Drakthul fleet was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Drakmori refugee ships. Visual contact established, another operator reported. The main display flickered to life, showing the approaching enemy fleet. Marcus had expected ships similar to the Drakmori vessels, but what he saw made his blood run cold. The Drakthul ships were nightmares of mismatched technology. Each vessel appeared to be cobbled together from dozens of different designs, creating grotesque hybrids that should have been impossible to operate. Weapon systems from one species were grafted onto hull designs from another, powered by engines that clearly belonged to a third civilization. Now I understand why your sabotage approach might work, Thrikesh said quietly beside him. Those ships are technological amalgamations. They must have constant compatibility issues, which means they're always looking for better integration solutions, Marcus added. Our biomechanical computers will look like the answer to their prayers. The Drakthul fleet approached the asteroid field where the volunteer ships waited. As predicted, they ignored the main Drakmori fleet in favor of what appeared to be easier prey. The Honor's Edge is reporting weapons lock from multiple enemy ships, the communications operator announced. Tell them to put up a good fight, Marcus said grimly. It has to look real. On the display, the battle began. The volunteer ships fought desperately against overwhelming odds, their new weapon systems performing impressively against the attacking Drakthul vessels. Marcus watched as the Flamebearer destroyed 2 enemy cruisers with its modified plasma cannons, making the technology look even more valuable. The Honor's Edge is reporting critical damage, the operator said. They're requesting permission to surrender. Marcus looked at the Nest Mother, who nodded gravely. Tell them to stand down and prepare for boarding, she ordered. The plan was entering its most dangerous phase. Now they would discover if the Drakthul were as predictable as Marcus hoped. Marcus watched the main display with mounting tension as Drakthul boarding parties swarmed over the captured volunteer ships. The corrupted dragon beings moved with predatory efficiency, their movements wrong in ways that made his skin crawl. Where the Drakmori were graceful and purposeful, The Drakthul were jerky and aggressive, as if they had forgotten how to move naturally. Boarding complete on both vessels, the sensor operator reported. The Drakthul are focusing on the weapon systems just as predicted. How long until they begin integration? Marcus asked. Veltar consulted his calculations. Based on their previous patterns, they will begin incorporating our technology within 2 hours. Full integration typically takes 6 to 8 hours. Marcus nodded, trying to control his breathing. The hardest part was waiting. The sabotage protocols couldn't be activated too early, or the Drakthul might have time to discover and counter them. But waiting too long risked having the enemy disperse before the weapons could take effect. Marcus, Dr. Kim said quietly beside him, are you certain the volunteer crews understood the timing? They know to get to the evacuation pods 15 minutes before I activate the protocols, Marcus replied. The pods are shielded and will register as debris when the ships are destroyed. At least that was the theory. In practice, Marcus wasn't sure the volunteers would survive what was coming. 3 hours passed in tense silence. Long-range sensors showed the main Drakthul fleet approaching slowly, confident in their overwhelming advantage. The captured ships had been brought into the center of their formation, where teams of corrupted engineers worked to understand and replicate the new technologies. They're beginning integration of the plasma cannon systems, Thrikesh reported. Energy signatures suggest they're installing our weapons on at least 12 ships. Shield generators? Marcus asked. 8 ships confirmed, possibly more, Veltar replied. They seem particularly interested in the biomechanical computers. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction. The enemy was taking the bait exactly as hoped. Movement in the asteroid field, the sensor operator announced suddenly. Multiple small contacts moving away from the captured ships. Evacuation pods, Marcus said with relief. The volunteers made it out. The nest mother stepped forward. How long until activation? Marcus checked his control interface. The quantum entanglement communicators showed green status lights for all sabotage systems. I can trigger the protocols at any time. But the more ships that have integrated our technology, the more effective the attack will be. And the longer we wait, the higher the chance of discovery, she pointed out. Before Marcus could respond, alarms echoed through the command center. The main display shifted to show the Drakthul fleet changing formation. They're moving to attack positions, Thrikesh observed grimly. It appears they've finished their initial analysis of our technology. Marcus's finger hovered over the activation controls. This is it. Once I trigger these protocols, there's no going back. Then do it, the nest mother commanded. Show these corrupted children what true Drakmori engineering can accomplish. Marcus took a deep breath and initiated the first sequence. Activating data collection protocols now. Throughout the Drakthul fleet, the hidden programs embedded in the biomechanical computers began their work. To the enemy engineers, it would look like routine system optimization. In reality, the programs were mapping network architectures, identifying critical systems, and preparing for the final phase of the attack. I'm reading massive data flows from the enemy fleet, Veltar reported with excitement. The collection protocols are working perfectly. Phase 2, Marcus announced, activating the next sequence. Implementing backdoor access points. This was the most dangerous part. If the Drakthul discovered the unauthorized access points, they might realize what was happening and shut down the infected systems. Marcus watched the quantum communicator displays, ready to abort if anything went wrong. Backdoors established, he reported after several tense minutes. I have control access to weapon systems on 23 enemy ships, including the dreadnoughts, the nest mother asked. Marcus checked the ship classifications. 4 of the 6 dreadnoughts have integrated our technology. The other 2 appear to be pure Drakthul designs. More than enough, Thrikesh said grimly. What happens now? Marcus smiled, feeling the familiar satisfaction of a perfectly executed engineering solution. Now we turn their stolen weapons against them. He activated the final sequence of protocols. Throughout the Drakthul fleet, plasma cannons that had been trained on the Drakmori ship suddenly swiveled to target their own vessels. Shield generators designed to protect against external attacks began creating resonance cascades in nearby systems. Biomechanical computers that had been optimizing fleet coordination started sending contradictory orders to different ships. The effect was immediate and devastating. The precisely ordered Drakthul formation erupted into chaos as ships began firing on each other, Massive explosions lit up space as dreadnoughts found themselves under attack from their own escort vessels. Incredible, Veltar whispered. The enemy fleet is destroying itself. Not entirely, Marcus warned, monitoring the situation through his control interface. The pure Drakthul ships are still functional, and they're starting to realize what's happening. Indeed, the unaffected enemy vessels were already moving to disengage from their compromised fleetmates. But the damage was extensive. Marcus counted at least 15 ships completely destroyed, with many more suffering critical damage. The remaining enemy ships are attempting to purge our technology from their systems, Thrikesh reported. Too late, Marcus said with satisfaction. The final protocol is already running. He had saved the most destructive sequence for last. Hidden within the maintenance routines of every biomechanical computer was a quantum cascade virus designed to corrupt any system it touched. Once activated, it would spread through networked systems like wildfire, causing catastrophic failures throughout the infected ships. Total system failures across the enemy fleet, the sensor operator announced. Even the ships that are trying to purge our technology are experiencing cascade failures. The main display showed the complete collapse of the Drakthul fleet. Ships that had seemed unstoppable moments before were now drifting hulks, their mismatched technologies finally proving incompatible under stress. The few vessels still capable of movement were fleeing the system as quickly as their damaged engines would. Allow, status report, the Nest Mother commanded. 41 enemy ships destroyed or disabled, Thrikesh reported. 6 ships escaped with significant damage. The Drakthul fleet has been effectively eliminated. The command center erupted in cheers as dragon beings celebrated their impossible victory. Marcus felt hands clapping his shoulders and heard congratulations in dozens of languages his translator couldn't process. Well done, human Marcus, the Nest Mother said, approaching his station. Your people's approach to warfare is unconventional, but effective. It only worked because of Drakmori engineering, Marcus replied honestly. I provided the idea, but your people made it reality. A true collaboration, she agreed, which raises an interesting question about what happens next. Marcus looked around the celebrating command center. What do you mean? The Drakthul will not give up after a single defeat. They will adapt, learn from this encounter, and return with countermeasures. When they do, we will need every advantage we can get. You want to continue working together, Marcus realized. I want to offer your species a choice, the Nest Mother said formally. The Drakmori have learned much from humanity's approach to engineering and warfare. In return, we can offer advanced technology and a place among the stars for your people. Marcus thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had never imagined that friendly aliens existed, let alone enemies like the Drakthul. That's not a decision I can make alone, he said finally. But I can make sure the message reaches the right people. Then it is settled, the Nest Mother declared. We will escort your ship back to human space. It is time for our species to meet properly. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus looked out at the stars and smiled. He had come to this system as a stranded mechanic on a dying ship. He was leaving as the architect of an alliance that might change the galaxy. Not bad for a day's work. Captain Morrison appeared at his elbow, grinning broadly. So, Marcus, still think you're just a mechanic? Marcus chuckled, watching as dragon beings and humans worked together to coordinate their next moves. Maybe not just a mechanic, but definitely still human. And that, said Thrikesh, approaching with Zethra beside him, appears to be exactly what the galaxy needs. As the Drakmori fleet prepared for the journey to human space, Marcus began planning his next project. There would be much work to do, new technologies to develop, and an enemy to prepare for. But for the first time in centuries, the dragon beings had hope, and humanity was about to discover that they were not alone among the stars.